it's funny. Like here's what I would say is when people go to evaluate, like, do I need to interact with someone like Dane? They do this like weird subjective interpretation of their experience of their employees. And I would just say, like, if your business isn't making money, that's actually when you should evaluate culture.
I agree. No, I really agree with that.
Yeah, like your system is perfectly designed for the outcome that it's getting, and your system should be designed to produce profit. And if you're not doing it, it's a people and system design problem. It really is. So call that culture. It's a culture problem. Like money, your lack of business performance is probably a culture problem. In the way that like the lack of winning for the Cleveland Browns is a culture problem. Like it's the same thing. So I think that don't call Dane if it's like, yeah, we've got this employee that's really annoying. So it's like,
you're totally right.
Who should you sell to? It's like, if you aren't generating as much profit as you want, change your culture. That's what I would say.
This whole series is made possible thanks to our friends at Bill and Vermont. Okay, so you've heard from one of our brands. Now you're going to hear from our own CEO. Taylor Holiday is the guy behind CTC. He's seen it all over 12 plus years, including a massive upswing in the last 3 years that led to a strategic partnership with our partners at Acacia. I can't wait to talk about his experience on how to integrate culture relative to business initiatives. By the time you're done, you're not going to see culture the same ever again. So if you don't want to shift culture, if you don't want to make some massive shifts, do not watch this episode, because by the time we're done, Taylor is going to convince you otherwise. Welcome to episode 5. I'm Dane Sanders. I'm the VP of Employee Development and Performance. I'm here with Taylor Holiday, CEO of Common Thread Collective. Welcome, Taylor.
Pleasure to be here, Dane.
Yeah, sure. Let's get after it. So we are 4 episodes deep into a conversation around culture design and culture change. We've told the history of CTC and what happened for the first decade or so, what's been happening the last 3 years, the whole development with Acacia, how we've made record revenue targets or blown those through those. We've hit profit targets, and we've had great talent all the way along, but how people have related with their culture and the community that we've been a part of together doing this thing, this collective, has resulted in disproportionate results in recent years. The reason I wanted to have you on this conversation is I wanted to have a real dialogue with leadership, because I know the folks that are listening are either in one of two camps. Either they are in charge of people and culture and HR and these kinds of things, and they're like, oh, I'd love to do some of these kinds of dynamics, but there's no way I can get my boss to buy in. Or they're the boss, and they're like, yeah, this is complicated. I got a business to run. And culture, how does culture fit in the midst of all these dynamics? So I would just love to start today talking about the ROI question. When you think about culture and business outcomes, how do they play together? Do they rank? Do they compete? Do you have a framework for deciding when to push harder or pivot or pull back? How do you think about culture relative to what we need to do as a business?
Well, I don't think about a culture as a thing I do. So culture is a thing you are. And so if you think about culture as sort of the sum of all the behavior of all the people, then I think it becomes very obvious that the behavior is directly connected to the outcomes. And so if you want to alter the outcomes, you have to alter the behavior, and the mechanism to alter the behavior is a cultural set of priorities, right? So I think those things are all very much the same thing. It's not like you go do culture. That's not how I think about it. I think about the sets of outcomes that I want, then therefore the sets of behaviors that would be connected to generating those outcomes, and then what has to be true of the standards, processes, sort of underlying environments that would produce those kinds of behaviors.
So outcomes lead to behavior. Behavior is what is that you design. That's the thing that you want to be conscious to or organize.
Yeah, I want to be clear that there are some actions that are more likely to produce certain kinds of outcomes, right? So if I could think about a metaphor here in sports, if a pitcher wants to throw really hard, and we know that fastball velocity is better connected to strikeouts and is better connected to winning percentage in baseball, and whether that's true or not, just stay with me for a second. There's this set of outcomes that are the result of certain inputs. Then the question is, well, what behaviors lead to pitchers throwing harder, and how could I then create the environment and sets of processes and standards that leads to participation in those behaviors to produce those outcomes. And those are questions of culture. Like I think about the idea of like being a place where throwing hard is celebrated and the kinds of efforts towards it get praise and attention, and you invite the kind of people who are after those kinds of things. So like they all intertwine in a way. But yeah, I really start probably with what behaviors I want to exist. And then I think about what is the kind of culture that, or the environment. And I think culture, environment, like it's behavior plus environment probably is culture, would produce those things.
So when you think about CTC over the last 12 years or so, there have been people, good pitchers, and there's been people who maybe had potential to become good pitchers.
Yeah.
And there's been a temptation, I think, to index towards the folks that are showing up with certain results and the folks that maybe they have potential, but they're not quite there yet. How do you think about the spectrum of potential and creating an environment that puts disproportionate weight on?
I think I think I used to prioritize potential a lot more. Now I care way less about it. I think this is probably an indication of business maturity too, which is that in the early days you can't afford actualized talent.
Yeah.
You can only afford potential talent.
It's just too expensive.
It's just too expensive. It's just they're too mature and they're earning. It's like, if you go again sticking with the sports metaphor, if you want to pay for Shea Gilgeous-Alexander right now, today he costs $70 million a year.
What's that Canadian?
That's a Canadian man. Yeah, another Canadian. But when the Thunder traded for him, he was actually like a throw-in to a trade deal. And so he was all potential at that point. And so the price related to that. But today he's way more. And so business is sort of like that, where when you start out, you tend to develop a culture around the idea of developing potential, but it's not actually because you believe that's the best way to build a business. If you could sort of first principles do anything, it's because it's your only choice. Whereas today, I realize that potential is actually a thing that you have to then spend a bunch of money extracting into real value and investing into developing into real value. And I have less appetite for that today than I did early on. And I would much rather have people show up who bring with them like talent and experience and add to this place versus like you show up with root raw skill and then we give you experience. It's just very expensive to do that, I think.
CTC's unfair advantage is we know that humans trade on trust. What if you could turn every customer interaction right at the point of decision making into a moment of trust building? That's exactly what Fermat does. AI-powered, seamless, personalized shopping experiences. Fermat does this with your full funnel solution. They make it as easy to build a full funnel as they do a single ad, leveraging artificial intelligence for a seamless, instant creation of a landing page that creates a personalized shopping experience. It actually lands for the customer like you know them. It actually paves the way for the very trust that we want to build in the marketplace. New product launches, seasonal change. There are these moments where you need customization on the fly and you don't have time to get under the hood and work this out. We have tools for that, and that tool is Fermat. Check out the link, reach out to them, tell them we sent you. But most importantly, look for the opportunities that they're going to create for your customers to build the very trust you're looking for.
Yeah, but let's go one more step. So let's say you're in a position where you can bring in talent.
Yep.
And they're really skilled.
Yep.
But they seem out of alignment with the methodology or the how we do things here. People like us do things like this.
Yeah, but they wouldn't make it in, right? Like we actually screen for that exact idea.
Yeah.
Even
though they're really talented.
Even though they're really talented. Like I just think that it depends on what we mean by talent, because I would just say that like talent I would evaluate as like capable of producing the kinds of outcomes that we want. And we would say that likely includes behavior that's consistent with a set of standards. Now, if somebody could do that in a way that was different than that, like I might be open to actually being okay with that. I would probably violate the standards and desire of the outcome. This might be a little bit of a change too in some of the ways I've thought about things historically. But for the most part, I think those things are connected. And so the reason you're the last line of evaluation of hiring, and I think we actually just had this yesterday. I've heard about an experience where you nixed somebody.
I did.
On the basis of them not matching versus somebody else thinking they had the talent or capacity to do it.
That's right.
So that still exists, that is the last chain. But again, I think it's all because those things are required to get to the outcome that we want within the context of what we're trying to do.
But there is a strict order here that you're clear on the return on you're looking for.
Yeah.
And that informs the cultural furniture for what you're creating.
For sure. Yeah. This probably is a big change that I a lot of people would say like culture, what's the culture eats?
It's a strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, and then if someone is, the metaphor is often a diva wide receiver that like you should get rid of them. I don't know that I believe that. I have a lot of room for diva wide receivers, and more so than I have in a long time. That like if you produce, then you get to kind of dictate the environment that you want, because the outcome is the culture. The highest priority is the result. Now there's obviously limitations to that. There are points at which that would break. But the way it would break is that you actually become detrimental to others producing outcomes.
That's right.
And in which case that would actually eliminate your all net outcome production. But it's still all about the production. I think that we have, there's this sort of this joke of like it's different standards for different people in like a sports environment. If you're, Shohei Ohtani, you get to kind of set your own workflow and nobody's going to really question you on it. And that I think that's true for different people at CTC in various ways. We've allowed a lot of room for some people to behave differently, but the standard is outcome. The standard is they produce the result. And so that's a non-negotiable standard. And moving that from some other input-based thing to the result as the standard, I think was a big shift. Whereas I think before, like a lot of our values were on things less connected to the business result.
You've been at this for a long time.
Yep.
We've seen some pretty exciting things happen in the last 3 years. And I'm asking this, I'm not trying to frame this up for affirmation of culture, but I am curious, like a candid take on the contribution that culture design and implementation has made on the success we've experienced together in the last few years.
I think we just we changed the behavior. And the way you change the behavior is through, I think, cultural design. And by making it more, if we go sort of just think about the distinction on our values pre and post, the values, the things that we would say that we would celebrate, the kinds of behaviors of the kinds of people we want, were just business outcomes. Whereas before they weren't. And it's pretty, that there's a whole set of complex things that then are cascade from that, but in its simplest form, we celebrated, and it seems so dumb to the idea that we ever didn't, but we really didn't. It's really important to understand that the financial results of CTC were not the point for a decade.
Yeah.
For 9 years.
Yeah.
We had a mission statement that didn't have to do with the P&L, and we didn't actually try to orient all of our behavior towards producing a financial result for the organization. And just changing that allowed us to then say, okay, let's rewrite our values as if the goal was to grow the business and make as much money as possible. And that led to a set of well-designed expectations and goals and measurement systems and KPIs and KEIs and all the things that are rooted in, do you help this business produce what it's trying to produce? What's kind of beautiful about that too is that value, which is one of our core values, is we create value. And value is a financial term. It gets hijacked a lot, but it really is a relationship between cost and profit created, whether for CTC or the customer. And that's what they hire us to do. So that's actually our business, is that too. And so by keeping everyone oriented around that, it leads to a very clear set of systems to evaluate the impact. And it's objective. I think a lot of this stuff can live in subjectivity in a way that what it leads to is a lot of individual interpretation of people's impact. And that is really, really hard because we all see people differently when we allow that to occur.
Given all this talk about standard setting, you need to understand this. For your people to do their best work, they need the right tools for the job. For our work at CTC, we think a lot about forecasting and measurement and getting the numbers right. Bill.com does the same thing. Every dollar invested efficiently and effectively. What CTC does for the brands we get to work with, Bill.com does for us. Bill simplifies spend and expense numbers. They connect contribution and performance, and they make accountability crystal clear. At CTC, everyone loves Bill.com. Luke uses it with his team. Tony uses it with his team. Even Taylor uses it. Even Mickey, the guy who's making this video, uses Bill.com. The same should be true for you and your team. So whether you're an agency managing a distributed team or you're a brand looking to raise the standard, check out Bill for yourself. There's a link on screen. Book a demo. Tell them CTC sent you.
Well, what you're pointing to a little bit is measuring in the context of culture.
Yep.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think whatever you espouse your culture to be, like if whoever's listening, like if you have values, if you would describe your culture some way, then I think the next question is like, well, how do you know how much somebody's being the culture, you know? And I think that's actually really, really hard. When you have soft, that's not even the right word necessarily, but like values and ideas and behavioral tenets that are really subjective and hard to determine. Like if you said, like words are really hard. Like is someone nice? I don't know. I think we probably all have a different opinion about each person and our experience of them.
That's right.
Of whether or not they are that thing. And I think a lot of attributes that are cultural values live in that space. And it means that everybody's sort of having a different experience of someone relative to their own relational dynamic with them. And so one person's like, yeah, this person is very attribute X. And then the next person's like, I don't experience them to be attribute X at all. And you're like, wow, what do I do with that? And I felt like I lived in that all the time, where I was having these conversations about different employees that it was like one person's experience of them was like horrendous. And then another person's experience of them was amazing. And I'm holding both of these going, what do I do?
That's right.
And so now what it feels like is if you take something like value, I can just go like, oh, Lacey's book of business is worth Y. She costs X. Her value is Z.
And it's funny, we didn't bring this up in the telling of the story of our culture, but that is actually how we started. We talked about contribution. It was simply that really simple math.
Very basic.
What are we paying? What are we attributing their contribution to the value that's coming in the door?
That's right.
But we didn't stop there. We went further.
Okay.
And we started to think through kind of counter global cultural values, especially as it relates to things like HR. So we used to have a value at CTC quite a while ago called respect the rest. And it's not like we don't care about people showing up to work with a full battery and ready to go. And yet we don't talk a lot about respecting the rest anymore. Now we talk more about organizing your life in such a way that you actually can contribute highest and best, and you create an environment where other people will want to do excellent work as well.
Yeah.
How do you hold those things in tension?
Well, I think what I learned is like, imagine there's two retail stores on a street, and one offers nap rooms and one offers treadmills. What kind of people would show up to the place that offers nap rooms? It's a question. What kind of people would?
Tired people?
Tired people. And so when you say, come to CTC because we respect the rest, you get tired people. And that's not necessarily bad. That doesn't make them bad people.
Right.
It just makes them tired people. And tired people are looking for, they've come usually from some place where they've experienced exhaustion or burnout. They're fatigued. They're not ready to give. They actually need rest. They need, and that's like, I want that for people. I want them to be restored, but I also think it's a really bad business strategy to like take a bunch of tired people in. And so those values, it's like there's like, I forget whose quote it is, but it's like if you build a hospital, sick people show up. And you shouldn't be surprised when they do. And so if you put out these values where a bunch of people are looking to receive things, you'll get people in need. And instead, like if I flip it to like, we want you to actually come here and give. We actually need you to give us things, not us give you things. Like we are actually in need of you, and you're coming with your energy, your knowledge, your experience, your skills, and you're going to give it to this place. You're not coming going, what do I get? Like what's in it for me? You get just a very different energy about it all. And so I think that was like the light bulb of the value. Again, whether rest is good or bad is not the point. I believe in rest. We should be restored. Like those are all good things.
That's right.
But I actually want people who show up and they're full of life, full of energy, ready to give. And they've actually been storing up energy their whole life for this moment, and they're ready to pour it into CTC on behalf of the customers. Yeah. And they can't wait to get back on the phone with the client. And they can't wait for Monday morning to show up so they can get up as early as possible to go and do the work because they're so excited about it. Yeah. Like, and that's just a huge discrepancy that shows up in the way that they behave that we actually created. And again, I don't actually blame anyone for coming here and going like, how many days of PTO do I get off? Because you told me you were going to respect the rest. And like, I'd really like to rest. It's like, well, yeah, I guess I created that. That's fair.
Yeah. So with the treadmill store example, and people show up and they're like, yeah, I'm ready to get in the treadmill.
Yeah, I want to run.
Really exciting. What have you seen of those people in time? Like, do they burn out? Or do they show up in different ways? Like, what have you seen?
I think that one of the things that I've also found to be really true is that this idea of burnout, we assume too much responsibility for it. And I don't mean that in a way that we're not responsible for it. I just mean that what I watch happen, I think about my own life. Like What causes me sort of exhaustion is like when my dog gets sick and I have to go to the vet at 2 a.m. and when my kids are going through some traumatic thing or my wife and I are going through an issue or like my life is bigger than my work and my job of keeping myself rested and well is not actually at the disposal of the company. Like the company doesn't actually get to control my well-being. Now, there's ways that they can like certainly cause undue amounts of stress. I'm not, and you should be conscious of that. But what I found is that one, people go through phases in their life. All of us, whether you're energized or not. And so you should expect that in some ways people are going to experience that. But for the most part, if you get people who show up and they have a deep enthusiasm for this work and the work itself does not exhaust them, they're energetic and enthusiastic about the work and the work is life-giving, then you don't often run into that problem as it relates to the context of the tasks they're doing. Like the concern is that agency in particular, you get some people who show up and by default, the narrative that they've accepted is like, agency work is oppressive. I don't like having 5 bosses. I'm going to be overworked here. I don't like this. And it's like, why are you here? Why are you doing this? And there was a lot of that. We used to like have like a pervasive culture of like client service work sucks as a part of a client service business.
Kind of like a doctor saying dealing with sick people. So.
Oh, what the ER is always so busy. It's like, yes.
That's what you designed.
This is like I used this metaphor. I was on with Mike Becker, or with Andrew Darian the other day, and I was talking about like, CTC is like a 24/7 liquor store. Like anything could happen at any time, all the time. And before you start on day one, you should know that. Like the Facebook ad machine runs on weekends, it runs on nights. It doesn't care if it's your birthday. It doesn't care if there's holidays. Like it's running, and that means the credit card might stop, the ad might break, someone might call you. Like that is our business. And so I think just getting more conscious of like, no, this is what we do. Yeah. We need people who are actually interested in that and okay with it. And if you're not, it's probably not for you, and I'm okay with that too.
Right.
That doesn't mean like there's some like moral rightness to our work. I'm not saying that. It's just like for some people, they love it. Like we joke about Anmar's, this one of our growth strategists, and Anmar's the kind of person that like I have to like physically move away from him when he's around because otherwise he would talk to me about e-commerce forever, 24 hours. Like literally when he was here for our client summit, like we sat in this room and at like 2 a.m. I was like, Anmar, I gotta go. But he would have sat there and asked me questions all night long. And it's because he loved it. He's learning. There's like this enthusiasm, this like, I need to know, and curiosity and excitement about the thing we're doing. And that kind of person is far less likely to get quote unquote burnt out by the kind of work we do than other people.
Yeah. So when we actually did start installing treadmill culture versus nap room culture, what were some of the surprises that came along the way? Especially for folks that are like, yeah, you're kind of reading my mail a little bit. I can see how we built what we built and we're getting what we got. And they're thinking about making some shifts. What were some surprises?
I just think that there are all kinds of people in there, including kinds that love behaving that way. Like sticking with there's people that love running on treadmills. That's weird. I hate running on a treadmill. But there are people that love running on a treadmill.
Yeah.
And so if you build a treadmill running thing, people will show up.
That's right.
And you'll have a bunch of people who enthusiastically like it. Yeah. And I think there's this temptation to believe that like, oh, I don't know if there's anybody like me, and maybe I'm weird, and maybe like I don't maybe I have to become this thing that is what other people want to be, and it's not. You don't. If you wanted to say like there's a company right now that I know, it's like on their website is like we work 7 hours a day 12 days a week, or 7 days a week 12 hours a day. That's who we are, and we love being that way. And guess what? You don't have to go work there.
That's right. At least they're being transparent.
But you know what they get? A bunch of people applying for the job because they're looking for that sort of experience, that trend in the trenches, going for it, running as fast as I can. And for this season of life, that's what I want. And so you'll find those people where whatever it is. And I think being authentically you and being conscious of what your work really is important. And you'll find people like it.
I've heard you talk about, you mentioned behavior earlier around the folks who are working in the organization, but there's a certain kind of behavior that the organization determines, things like hiring, firing, promoting, titles, initiatives. How does culture inform those things, or does it?
I think, again, I'm being a little bit oversimplistic with this, but the reality is that I want it to be as much about the money as I can. I know you hate that I say this.
No, I actually don't hate.
Okay.
Because at least money is it's clear.
Yeah. Well, it's clearer
like how
than
to
a
win,
lot of things.
how to win the game.
I think that's the key, is that what I experience people want to know is that, like, with those things, hiring, firing, they want to know why more than anything.
Yeah.
And when it feels unfair or wrong is when it's unclear. And that introduces you like to call them gaps. It's a place where stories get constructed. And in the absence of a story, people make one up.
That's right.
And so the thing about money, what it does is that if you just go like, if everybody, again, I'm using names right now, but these are just illustrative, and Lacey's a long-standing employee. Everyone could look at it and go, oh, Lacey's book of business is the biggest, and she got a raise. Everyone kind of goes, oh, okay.
That makes sense.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, Matt drove the most sales, like he made the most commission, like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And there's weird things, like sales is this good example of a place where people don't really ever wonder about money. Like, it's just the most obviously simple version of the game. You get X% commission if you bring in a lead. You brought in all these leads. You made that much money. Everyone kind of goes, yeah, that's how it works. There's places where it gets a lot harder. And I think what happens is, depending on the business that you're in, you end up with more roles that it's less clear how they impact the money. That's actually really problematic. And it probably represents a bunch of spaces that you need to think about redesigning the role to get clear on how it impacts the money. And so I think we've talked about this. Like, before we sat down, you just told me about how you just closed a client where you're generating revenue doing what you're doing. And it's because you understand that your role is one of the ones that could dangerously fall into a lack of clarity about how it impacts money.
Yeah, value.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's harder to do, and so you have to work more to do it because you don't want it to live in the subjective interpretation of Taylor. This is like the danger is that, like, I'm hungry right now. That means I'm grumpy. If that's the day I'm evaluating you, you don't want that to be in the pot on why you get a raise or not. Like, and so I think those are the things that we're trying to. Why I like hiring is as close as it can be to value, as close as it can be to the impact on the customer. That's best. And getting really clear, then the next obligation there is, how does the company make money? And I think the more people that you can educate about that, the better your company is going to be too. Because, like, in our world, there's like these very clear inputs that drive our growth. New customers added to the company, retaining the customers that exist for long periods of time, and increasing the values of the customers when they're here. It's very simple to take a big idea like revenue and go after, if you can impact these levers in ways that you can assign causally to yourself, your value to CTC is going to go up. And there's places where causal impact is easier and harder to sort out. And this is just like, if you think about attribution and incrementality in media, when you have one ad channel, like, it's very simple to be like, Facebook caused the revenue, there's only one ad channel. Then all of a sudden there's like 35 ad channels, and you've got TikTok and Snapchat and Pinterest and TikTok, and it becomes like hazier to assign the value. The same is true in a business like ours, where if you want to take responsibility for CTC's Facebook media revenue, it's 12 years of a lot of people doing a lot of things to build that business, that for any one person to put their hand up and say, that money's mine, is really hard to sort out, and you're probably more replaceable just because there's so much legacy there. Whereas if you go create a net new line of business and you're the only person doing the work on that line of business, it's very easily to causally assign yourself money. So a lot of times, this is actually really challenging for people to understand, is they'll look at someone doing something new and they'll go, wait a second, why is that person able to create more value for themselves than me inside of the biggest line item of the business? And this is where understanding, like, replacement cost and value potential is, like, it's a hard lesson that the market teaches people usually over time. But the more that we can surface that and allow people to understand it now, I think it helps them to get connected to career decisions, where they want to go, how they want to approach it, and also what's fair and not fair in terms of how people get paid.
You talk a lot about clarity and leverage, and clarity in particular. We've talked a lot, like, we want to get as clear as possible around the rules of the game.
Yep.
How do you win? How do you get attribution? Can you leverage culture for a company?
Can you leverage culture?
Like, how does leverage play into the conversation around a collective set of values and us kind of behaving a certain kind of way to get a certain kind of outcome?
Yeah, so I think like leverage as the idea of that, like, if we're doing a tug of war and there's 15 people, if you get them all to pull at the same time, you create leverage, you create more force. And so I think culture is like this, where the behavior I just described, where everybody's in pursuit of value for the company and themselves, the more people that
And themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it actually is like first self, second organization. Like, I actually think that is like inherently people are rationally self-interested, and you need to leverage that rational self-interest towards the interest of the company.
There it is.
And that's what you should do. And the more people that you can get to do that, the more people you suddenly get tugging on the same end of the rope, the value of the company increases. And so that my baseline assumption at all times, everywhere, is that every employee, nobody's altruistically trying to offer me themselves. Not my really good friend Dane, not my high school buddy Aaron, none of them. They will all leave me if it is in rational self-interest for them to do so.
Like your dog or your cat under duress.
Exactly. Like, and I have seen this from the closest people in my life.
Yeah.
And in a way that in the beginning, I think you start with this sense that we're like in some unique partnership or camaraderie. And I would just offer to anyone who believes that about the people around you is that like they will leave if the opportunity is better.
And does that, because I know we've been friends for a long time, there's been seasons where you've seen that in a more cynical perspective, but now it doesn't sound cynical. It sounds more realistic.
I feel more like pragmatic about it. It used to be emotional.
You're not offended by it.
I'm not offended by it. Yeah. I think I have just a low, maybe like a lower baseline assumption of who we are as human beings. But and maybe it's not even lower. It just is. It actually makes sense to me that you would be rationally self-interested. Why would you defer your own personal well-being for mine?
Right.
Like, it doesn't actually make any sense at all. And in fact, that's incredibly naive and selfish of me to assume you would do so.
But when you can create alignment,
yes,
when my interest and your interest are the same interest,
that's right.
We can create something special.
We can, we can apply a very powerful force in the direction of the corporate value. I also think that the more people participate in the corporate benefit, the more their personal benefit is aligned as well. And so that's another thing that I think is one of the ways that this really breaks down is a lot of times people feel like they're being exploited by the corporation. And the truth is they are. Literally, profit is literally the exploitation of labor. Like, it is the delta between what I pay you and what I can charge for your work.
That's right.
And so if you don't benefit in that at all, then it is purely how much you take and how much I get are at direct conflict with one another. But if you participate in the profit proceeds as well, then suddenly there's an aligned interest in that incentive. So there is a way, the capitalist system, just not to get too political here, does have an underpinning that there is for the labor that's not participatory in the capital an exploitive state that I think agencies in particular, it's very obvious to people because they are the product.
Yeah.
And so they know what you're charging for them and they know what you're paying for them. And it's just way more obvious than a widget. With a widget, it's like everybody's who made it's kind of baked into the thing, but you don't see yourself in the thing.
But it's the same thing.
It's the same idea. Yeah. It's less obvious.
Yeah.
So I think in a human service business in particular, the more that people can be aligned towards participation in the capital, the better it's going to be.
When we first started this exercise, we have designed tools within CTC to measure as objectively you can, but also honoring the subjective reality of assessing people, these tools for measuring culture.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, we weren't sure we could do any of it.
Yep.
And admittedly, it's certainly not, it's imperfect data that we're getting today, but what's your sentiment around being able to measure things connected to culture in the new world? Especially, I think of like our relationship with our new partners and tech enablement and AI. What's your sense of the future of culture design and measurement?
I think the more that you can actually prove that behaviors impact the financial outcomes, and the clearer you can get on about that, like you have potential to find edges that would allow you to build a better organization. I think, again, I just use the baseball metaphor, like in constant pursuit of the inputs of winning, people will discover edges that exist for a period of time and then get competed away. I think this is sort of a similar thing where I think that there's, with this process, a chance that we find certain kinds of behaviors that are more likely to produce the outcomes we care about, that are non-obvious. So as an example, like one of the ones I'm thinking about right now is even the way we relate to this idea of the drama tax is an interesting one, right? Like where we have too high, just right, too low.
Yep.
I'm not convinced that too high is a problem. As an example, there's a person right now that I'm watching their behavior in this really interesting way, which is like they seem to present as high drama, but it also leads to like a high standard of expectation of value. And the people that experience them as drama are actually the kind of people that I actually want to see raise their own standard of value. So I think, but to have the measurement system in place allows you to begin to analyze the details. I think you have to be careful to just assume what the outcomes mean right up from the start, but the measuring allows for unearthing I think, interesting ideas.
And we're in a measurement renaissance, right?
Yeah,
We can
I think there's more opportunity than ever before
Yeah.
to begin to accumulate that data and to analyze it in ways that you probably couldn't before.
Yeah. Okay, last question, and it relates to folks that are listening who maybe they aren't the CEO or the founder, but they're enrolled in these ideas, and they're especially this idea of making it a little bit more accessible through the quantification of the game of business, and really tying cultural values, cultural initiatives around revenue and contribution. And but this all sounds like, look, my job is people and culture and HR. The CEO is about the business. They're stressed out. It's hard to get a hold of them. Like, what advice would you give to someone who's in charge of people and culture about how to approach this, especially if these are unfamiliar concepts for the leadership at the organization?
I think that it's the same advice that I give marketers when they go to speak to finance, or finance when they go to speak to marketers, which is that it is on you to adopt the other's language. It is not predicated on them to adopt yours. And so if you're going to speak in culture, you could have a problem. Your job is to understand how the things that you uniquely manage translate to the things they care about. And that's why I just go back to, in most cases, that's some financial reality. And the more that you can present how these things connect, like if you're going to tell people on the idea that they should do 5 voices inside of your company, and you don't do, if you can't connect that to why that's going to lead to a better financial outcome for the company and how you're going to track it and hold yourself accountable to that truth,
It's just a cost center.
you are developing a thing that they will inherently hate and will constantly find as a nuisance.
Because they see it as an expense.
Yes.
Just something
It draws them away.
It draws them away from profit.
Yeah. And so I think it is really on you. And I think that it's a skill. And it's a skill for everyone. It's not just HR people. This is not a problem that is just novel to them. It's if you want to do an event, if you want to do a photo shoot, if you want to launch a new ad channel, if you want to hire an employee, if you want to take on a new AI software, wherever you are in the organization, the best people are ones that are committed to the idea that our job is to deliver a return on this cost in some very clear time horizon, and I'm going to be accountable to that. And if you, I have this saying that I use a lot, which is that the most value accrues to the most accountable person. And so I think that's like a good general principle for any ask.
Well, tease that out a little bit. Say the phrase again and define the term.
When there's big problems in a company, like let's say your company you're in the B2B space or B2C, right? And there's we have a new customer problem or a client retention problem. These are big, hairy problems that no one person can be individually responsible for. But the person I'm willing to pay the most money is the person who will put their hand up and say, I will take on individual responsibility for this complex systemic issue, and you can fire me if it doesn't work, but I want to be equally responsible if it does. So you will put your neck on the line for the biggest problem that you know will actually depend on multiple people, because that's my reality all the time. And so the more people step through that door to take on the biggest challenge with the most complexity, the highest potential reward, and be individually accountable for it, and not be willing to go, yeah, but then Mikey didn't do it. It's like, no, I don't want to hear any of that. I just want, if it succeeds or fails, I want you to say, here it is. And I think about this we say this when we sell our customers, is that it's the same thing. It would be very easy for me to say, well, we had a contribution margin goal, but then you ran out of stock on the item, and then you gave your inventory to retail, and then you didn't launch that thing you said you were going to do. But the second I hear that, I go, oh, so you weren't actually in the position to be an authority of this, so I shouldn't treat you as if you are. You're not accountable. But instead, it's like, yep, we didn't launch the thing, and I should have seen it coming, and that was my fault. I'll do a better job to be connected to the supply chain in the future. And even though I don't make the decision, I should know and should have considered it and should have checked it before I started. My fault. There's a huge distinction in those things. And one person will accrue more value to themselves because the CEO, the people in charge, love those kinds of people. They will want to give them more authority and a broader sphere of responsibility. So I think that that's like, just if you're an HR person, it seems crazy that you would be accountable to the profit of the company. But do you want to go up in authority? Do you want to be paid more? Do you want more sphere of authority? Like, if so, decide that those boundaries in your head of where role lines are drawn, like, wipe them out.
Yeah, there are opportunities.
They're opportunities.
Yeah.
How do you define culture? Do you have a culture definition? Like a working one?
That's a good question. How have I been describing culture? It's mostly been describing it as creating an environment conducive to draw people in, to draw a certain group of people in, and repel another kind of group of people.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I saw, there was like this, I don't know if it was a comedian or something. Maybe it was, I think it was like a Jewish comedian, and he was talking about like Muslims praying five times a day, Jewish people praying 3 times a day, and Christians praying twice a year. And it was like this joke that I think,
That is funny.
like those are cultural, that's like culture, is that there's this set of corresponding assigned behaviors to a group of people that you know them by. You'll know them by their fruit, kind of like you'll know them by their behavior.
Yeah.
And I think like, there's this thing that like your culture is like, if people come and watch you behave, they're the things that stand out as the things that most of the people do. That's the cultural things.
Well, what you remind me of is your buddy Seth Godin. People like us do things like this.
Yeah. So what are the things that they do? That's like what the culture becomes, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody walked in and like these all people are doing something similar, what is that thing? And that would become the identifying attribute of that culture. And I think like for a while the culture was like, the common shared behavior was like backbitey Slack conversations. And that was actually the only common identifying attribute of a bunch of people. That kind of thing is like where if I really go like, even today I think about this, like what is the actual common behavior? I think one of the things that I introduce in culture a lot is that like there's this like default challenge everything is like a thing that becomes a cultural item that is a little bit annoying to most people as an outsider, but I bet you would experience that as like it's almost argumentative, it's almost
Provocative.
yeah
Yeah.
constantly everywhere, which I think is like it attracts a certain kind of customer too. I actually think
So on both sides of the equation, the customer and the employee.
yeah.
Yeah.
And even I notice it in like even more than some of our more recent GSs. And at first you're like, oh, this is so annoying. Like, but then you're like, oh, but that's exactly the kind of person that would expect to be here or be attracted to the kind of content that exists.
Especially if everyone were GSs. What do you do with people who are different skill sets?
I think they've always had a hard time interacting with the culture. I think it's always been a challenge. In particular, it shows up in, I think, the distinction with creative folks who don't necessarily always interact in that way. Like, I'd be curious, how many of our 5 voices people are creative voice first?
Actual percentage, I don't know off the top of my head, but
Isn't it a lower percentage generally of the population, though? Like, what
Yeah. So it goes. So the pioneers are 7%,
Yep.
and creatives are 11%.
Yeah, those are
and
the two
the
lowest.
big chunk is
Guardian,
guardians and nurturers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, you know, agency world, we probably hire more than 11%, but it's probably because again, pioneers. We have a lot of pioneers in our culture. Well, especially in spaces like leadership with accounts.
Interesting. I always thought that GSs were disproportionately guardians.
In our particular context?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, they are risk averse, but I think they tend to drive resources and people towards a particular outcome. They seem motivated by winning more often than not losing. Yeah.
Interesting. I think my first 7 years, I thought about culture all the time, and now I never think about it.
Well, I think you think about it, but it doesn't fall.
No,
in the
like I
category.
literally don't think about the word.
Well, you think about behavior.
Yeah, but I'm trying to figure out like what. I think one of the things that happens is that when you're thinking about culture all the time, in some ways you're manufacturing, like you're presenting. I think what I got into a space of is that like I kind of got broken down to this like I think because somewhat of it is culture. The little bit of it is the danger is that it's like what people think about you is, And so it puts an immense amount of focus all the time on thinking about what other people are thinking about you. And in an office, that's very prevalent. Like when you're giving speeches all the time and doing all these things, like that was a big part of how I led early on. And it felt in some ways like a version of myself I was always like presenting. Like, and not that it was like, it was genuinely me, but it was also like a level 9 version of yourself all the time. Like that you're, versus one of the things about the last 3 years is that I think I felt less thoughtful about what others are thinking about me, and I thought more about the work, the actions, like what are we doing, like than I did about, like I can't remember the last time I gave a speech at CTC meetings. Like I used to give a deck and a thing on a story, and I would think about these stories all the time. I remember this one I did about this like mushrooms, and like I would just like, and I don't do that anymore. So I think there's something about the one of the traps I think of culture is that you feel like you have to create a thing, versus I think the most authentic cultures are these people that are like expressing like genuinely who they are all the time.
100%. Well, and that begins I think you're right. Like I think that when we do it right, we aren't talking about culture very often, but we do talk a lot about, like when we're taking on candidate interviews, we're pretty, like the final interview is pretty much, you probably don't want to work here, and here are all the reasons why, and it's just a gauntlet to see what people do in response.
Yeah.
And it's not, especially with enough reps, in a lot of cases it feels like you can tell who the real folks are and who are the ones who are trying to, show out, like appear as though they're those kinds of folks.
But I think that the point is that I don't know that anybody, like in the early days, at peak like CTC Dream Day era, I think if people talked about CTC, they would talk about culture.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would now. And not because there isn't a culture.
Right.
But I just think the culture isn't the culture, if that makes sense. Like in those days, what CTC was almost this idea that like it's an experience. It's like versus now I don't think that's what it is. I think it's like an agency that does work that is trying to help clients succeed. Like it's closer to what it should be than like a celebration of itself in this weird way. Like,
especially the celebration portion. Like it's funny you say that. Like I tell me if this resonates with you. I'll describe CTC as, and you alluded to this at the very beginning of this conversation, this idea of maturation, where it's like, I think we know who we are now. And we actually don't have much interest in being a different kind of thing. So it's more like perpetuating identity.
I think closer. Well, and I think you have a bunch of people with stronger individual identity. So one of the things that I've noticed is when you have a bunch of people that, like, as an example, want celebration and awards as an idea. A certain kind of people that are looking for that sort of externality of validation constantly everywhere, they have this perpetual need. I actually feel we have like a stronger set of like people that are fine without us. And they need CTC less than they ever have, and therefore we're better as a thing. Like we have stronger people with better individual identity that's not associated with us. And when you put a bunch of people that are like okay and strong and emotionally well, and their identity is rooted beyond the thing that they're in, like it's lower drama. Like the tax is just lower.
It is, but they're still pulling the rope in the same direction.
Right. Because the thing that they're after is obvious and clear, but this like need for CTC to validate them in some way is like just lower. And so if they don't get that in the same way, they're okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things I struggle with, and there's been various points where I've gotten more or less of this feedback.
I was going to say, you're a little less important now.
Exactly. Well, and my affirmation of people is less important. It's not a thing I do. Maybe it's a deficit. I don't know, whatever, but it's not a thing. And so anytime I tried to create those spaces, it was a lot of work for me. It was a lot of effort. And like, it was like, I think, I was always told how important it is and all these things. And I got to this place where I was like, okay, that's probably true. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know if I'm ever going to do it. I'm not going to be that person. Like, it's just not going to be the thing. So then it was like, well, suddenly, like, I don't think everybody needs it as much. Maybe they want it, but they don't need it, and they're okay. And the validation can come from other mechanisms. So I don't know. There's just like all these pieces of how much the culture was the center point of the culture of the thing, and like it absorbs a lot of oxygen.
Well, going back to the nap room versus the treadmill room,
Yeah.
there is a sense in which if people are showing up to a treadmill store,
Yeah.
they've done something in advance of showing up at the store. You don't have to do a lot to show up at the nap store.
No.
But there's a sense of personal responsibility
Yeah.
that's going on for those individuals. And I do think that's far more true now than it was historically. I have a sense of, I don't feel like there's a lot of where insecurity is exposed in some weird way.
Well, and yeah, I don't think we even invite conversations about it. And like that's
Yeah.
like a
So if there was, we wouldn't even know.
well, and to be honest, like this goes back to this whole movement, like this bring your whole self to work idea.
Right, yeah.
That I think, good or bad, I don't know the answer. I don't know. I do know that if you do, there's a big cost to that.
Yeah.
That risk to you individually, and the organization is actually not often equipped to deal with the things that we are experiencing in our lives, and that there are better outlets for that part of yourself than your office and your work. And I still long for people to have those needs and things met. It's not that I don't care about them. It's that I actually think that by representing that I was the person or this place was the place for it to exist was wrong. It was harmful. Because it'd be like, again, if I told people I was going to, cure their chicken pox, and I told them to bring their chicken pox here, like I would not be helpful, and I would actually cause a lot of problems to other people because I don't know how to do that. I'm not a doctor. And, emotional challenges and things going on and addiction and whatever people deal with, like they're real and they're heavy, but a marketing agency is not the place for them.
Right.
So
when those things, some of those things are part of the human condition, and people show up with those things periodically. We don't solve for those in the context of work. What for folks what do you do?
you get help from the places that have spent their long existence in figuring out how to serve them. And there's lots of them, and you should now there's also this question like the availability of the resources, providing healthcare so that there's connections and somebody to go to ask about those things. Those are all great. Like those are important avenues for channeling the inevitability of human stuff we all deal with.
Well, we covered a lot of ground, and I have no doubt that in your particular use case, you have questions and thoughts. If you do, reach out our way. We'd love to continue the conversation in a way that I hope is resourceful to you. But thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, absolutely.